Folks, you know how it is. No bad days. How can I have a bad day? How can I have a bad day? I'm about to talk to Ding Dong, who's at my door, none other than Mr. Jack the Bear. Hey, Tony, how you doing, buddy?
G'day, Rick. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good, mate. Thank you for joining me.
Pleasure. Good to be asked on, mate.
Yeah,
by
man.
the way, I'm not a guitarist, by the way, so I feel particularly privileged.
Well, this is the whole thing, man. The whole thing that I wanted to do was give people a reason to tune in. And yeah, we get guitar players, some name guys, we get guys from the brands, but if I want to watch something, I want to learn something to be roped in. And what do I want to learn about? Man, I don't watch TV. I don't have a TV. I watch YouTube and I learn stuff.
Yeah.
I learn stuff about, there's so much to do when it comes to YouTubing. Making thumbnails, lighting, like, hey man, my lighting looks pretty good, doesn't it? I've got a light there bouncing off a wall for diffusion and all that shit. I've had to learn that stuff.
Yeah.
But I also want to learn how to make my mixes better to present to a mastering engineer so that I can get the best bang for the buck and not have them going, well, if you had done this, it would have been a lot better.
Yeah.
So that's why I hit you up, mate. So I'm really glad that you said yes.
Well, thank you. I'll do my best to try and make have a decent account here. So we'll see how we go. We'll see how we go.
We will. I just want to say, hey, Johnny Bean, who's in the chat room already. He's got a great little guitar podcast himself. So when you invite me on, Johnny, I'll come for a chat.
There you go.
Shameless self-promotion.
Got to do it, man. Squeaky wheel gets the grease, right?
That's right. And speaking of which, I got this cool little graphic that when I press this button here, boom, there's a little thumb and there's a little subscribe and there's a little notification bell. So you know what to do, folks, because there's lots of very informative educational stuff like this, as well as the Guitar Stars. So, Jack, I'm going to ask, what got you hooked on this crazy world of mastering, mate? How did it all get started for you?
Well, the thing I often tell people, Rick, is that mastering found me. I grew up as a real lover of music from a young child, collected lots of records. I think I really seriously started to collect records, as in really look after records and read up about hi-fi and appreciate sound from late 14, early 15, around that time, early high school. And so as I started collecting records, of course, back in the day, all your vinyl notes and all your detail was there. And I was just a real boffin for looking at all these things. And so, there's always these engineers and producers that would come up, and I thought, I didn't have any talent to play. I certainly didn't have any looks to be on stage. So I thought, okay, I want to get involved in music. I want to get involved somehow in an artistic, creative way. But I worked out very early that I'm going to have to do something behind the scenes. But I was always fascinated with how records were made because, listening to stereo records as a kid and listening to effects is all such a mystery. And I was like, I want to know how to do that. How do they do this stuff? It's all magic.
Yeah.
So I finished up high school and I went overseas. My dad, who was a very, God bless him, very well-meaning, wanted me to go down the path of academia, as of all of his brothers and sisters. He was the only one that didn't actually, for reasons not through his fault, never got to achieve. He was going to become a doctor. That was his thing. Yep. So I didn't. He said, "Well, you're going to do it for me. You're going to do it for the family." Wrong. So being a very rebellious teenager, as most of us were, I said, no, fuck that. I'm not going to school. I hate school. Smart as I am, I'm just not into it. Mm-hmm. So I went and traveled and spent a long time, went over to Canada, went to America. I chose to go there because all the records, even though I grew up and loved a lot of English music and British bands, for some reason, just the sound of American records just appealed to me more. Just don't ask me why, it just did.
Yep.
And so I thought, okay, well, I want to go and learn how they do it.
Sure.
And so I traveled, man, and I fell into mastering quite simply by meeting a mastering engineer who was telling me, what do you do in Australia? At the time, I said I was a DJ, not really a DJ, but I like records. I play records. I'm right into it. He said, how'd you like to cut your own vinyl.
Cool.
And I thought, oh, okay, well, how? He said, no, it's mastering. I'm a mastering engineer. Now, up until that time, Rick, I'd only ever seen mastering credits once or twice. Never knew what it was. There was no internet to explore it. I just didn't think much of it. I said, okay, cool. What's that involve? So I invited him to his place and he showed me his lathe, and it was a tape machine, console lathe, and showed me the process. And I just went, wow, this is really cool. And what appealed to me initially about it was, first of all, the speed of the process. Like back then, sitting in lots of sessions, you'd be sitting there listening to a kick drum for 3 hours, or, tracking, mixing, lengthy process. And if you didn't really like what you were listening to and what was being worked on, it could get pretty boring. Whereas mastering-wise, if you weren't quite digging what you were working on there, it didn't really matter so much, because chances were the next record 2-3 hours later, whatever, would be something that you like. So it also opened you up to a bigger variety of music. And I grew up with quite an eclectic range of music growing up, and I liked a lot of stuff. So those two things were appealing. But the kicker was when this guy said, so what do you want to do with yourself? I said, well, I want to work in music, man. I just want to make a living doing what I love.
Mm-hmm.
He said, well, think about this. He said, right now, where you are, just hanging out today, there are 400 people outside who will cut their left arm off just to clean the toilet. Now, you're in for now. If they like you enough, you may become the guy that winds up the cables at the end of the session, and then maybe you'll become a tape operator, and then might become an assistant engineer, and maybe 9 years from now, you might become an engineer. But no one knows about this mastering gig. Records are being made. There's a demand for it, and there's just not enough supply. So I took a pragmatic decision to go, right, show me the ropes, show me what you're doing. Let's go down this avenue. Cool. Because I just want to do something in music. I just wanted to do something that I love to do and enjoy my life. Because as a kid, do you remember the Mars commercial when we were kids? There was a slogan for Mars, the chocolate bar. It said,
Mars a day. No.
Well,
yeah.
That one. That's the jingle.
Yeah.
But before that, they had a motto, which was 8 hours work, 8 hours rest, and 8 hours play.
Okay.
Right. So on that theorem, that meant that theoretically 50% of my waking hours were going to be spent working. So I thought, fuck, if that's the case, I better find something I like to do, because that's a big chunk of my waking hours.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, man, I just found something I love to do and enjoy it. And that's how I kind of fell into it. But, I didn't really get to start my own thing until 1991. That's when I started Deluxe. Well, no, Deluxe actually was a rebranding in 2006. But at the time, it was just Jack the Bear Mastering. So, and I started that in Melbourne in 1991.
Wow, cool.
So I traveled. So the 80s was a lot of traveling, bumming around, being a transient, just going all over the place, spending a lot of time, Toronto, New York, a little time in Europe, and just kind of schlepping it really, mate, and just piecing together little bits of information from this place and from that place. And, my training, if you will, was not the traditional training that a lot of my peers and my colleagues of my age, my generation, where you went to a studio, you cleaned the floors, you did the assistance role, you spent your time doing all the hard yards and work your way up the system. And then, then eventually people went off and became independent. And for many, many years, that was really was what drove my imposter syndrome, which I held for over. In fact, I shouldn't say the worst, because everyone's got it, but I felt I had the worst case of imposter syndrome. But it stayed with me. This is really being honest, man. Yeah. Until about 2 years ago.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I had to get some therapy for that. And I remember I wrote a big blog about it, and people couldn't believe it. They said, "You fucking serious? You really mean what you're saying?" I said, "Yeah, man, it's for true." And then all of a sudden people saying, "Well, listen, you know what? I actually feel the same." And
wow.
There was a lot of people were just thanking me for, talking about it. And because it's still a big thing in our industry, but we're kind of digressing here from the story, and we can get back to that issue, because I think it's big for artists and in that whole Life Talk issue. But no, man. So I settled back in Australia. in 1991 during the recession we had to have, and just started. I came back here. I was 28 and a bit, and didn't have a pot to piss in, bag of clothes, $8,000 of debt that I still owed people from being overseas. No hope, no job, no prospects. Dick,
Yep.
and started from that, and just through a lot of very happy accidents along the way, I managed to cobble together a system. Started in the bedroom of a flat with my newborn son at the time, crawling around all over the cables. And from there, we went from the coffee table into a bedroom within that flat, and then from the bedroom of the flat into a fibro shack in the back of a house in Essendon in Melbourne. And then I went to Sing Sing, got into Sing Sing 1999, ended 99. And that's where I think the legitimacy started kicking in for me. And then Sing Sing lasted until February 2006 and opened the doors at my current studio, Deluxe, in April of 2006. And I've been there ever since, 14 and a half years now.
Wow, cool. So I think that's when I became aware of you, was when you're at Sing Sing.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big, that was a very, is it still around?
Sing Sing, the actual building where I was located in back then, unfortunately, no. That complex, it was a fantastic complex. It's now becoming apartments, just like all the big properties in the inner city, unfortunately. But thankfully, those guys managed to move down to another location, Sing Sing South, just down the road from that location. Okay. So they're still thriving, still happening, still making great records, and still kicking ass, which is wonderful, because they're an institution, man. And totally. I'm always going to be grateful to them for being there, because it's weird, how it works with people's perception. If you belong at a certain place, all of a sudden there's a certain thing about you there, a certain amount of legitimacy straight away, where at least people will. That's the thing I noticed. Before I went there, I was getting gigs, but to get something a bit more serious, no one would want to know you. Then it's like, oh, I'm working at Sing Sing. Oh, didn't always guarantee you get the gig, especially in the beginning, but at the very least, you got a hearing.
Yeah, right.
And that made the difference. So that in itself was enough of a shift to potentially open me up to more possibilities. And then, like with everything, it's a numbers game after that.
Sure, sure. So you said you started out pretty much in a bedroom setup, and worked your way up to Sing Sing, which is, they were world-class rooms there, right?
Yeah.
And it's my understanding that mastering, a lot of it is to do with having an awesome room to work in and being able to hear everything accurately. How were you compensating in the early days for not being in a not so perfect room?
I worked in shit boxes, all of them.
Really? Yeah.
The same way I tell people what to do now in their home setups. Yeah. People, back then there was no internet to be able to go to a forum, well, especially in the early 90s, there was no internet or forums to go online to learn about room acoustics and all that kind of gear. Mm-hmm. And it was just friends that helped me put these makeshift traps, and it was all trial and error. Yep. And just doing something, playing it out somewhere else, see how it sounds here, see how it sounds there. And eventually, like with any room, you learn the room. Yeah. And it just took longer to learn the environment than it would in a better listing environment. So that's how that happened. Uh-huh.
So fast forward to 2006, you said you opened your own Deluxe. Now you went through the whole process of building a world-class sounding room, yeah? What was involved in that, man? How did you go about doing that?
Well, it all started with looking for a designer at the time, and I went through all these different people in America who were well-known people, and the cost was just astronomical until one of my mastering mentors, Dave Collins, shout out Dave, told me, have you spoken to George Augsburger? And I said, George won't do my room. He's like fucking Yoda. I said, no, you'd be surprised. He's very approachable. Cool. He's a cantankerous old fuck, but he's approachable. So Dave knew George because Dave at the time was working at Marcuson Mastering in LA, and prior to that he was at A&M Mastering, and both those rooms George had worked on. So basically he hooked it up, and I spoke to George, and George was really keen because he hadn't been to Australia. He'd never done a room in Australia before, so he wanted to have something like that on his portfolio. And he made it so unbelievably attractive for me. I put it this way: the cost to design both rooms, to fly him out here, put him up for a week, tune both rooms from start to finish, cost me less than what some of the bigger name designers in America wanted just for drawings.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
That's cool.
I couldn't believe it. I
Yeah.
couldn't believe it. So we got him on board, and then after that it was just getting together some builders. Always fun doing an owner builder job. I'll never do that shit again, man. It was we basically started with an empty shell in Brunswick. We were very lucky to find a location, and we had it from just 4 bare walls into the finished article in 12 weeks. And
Wow.
we went just round the clock. Well, we started in January, just before the Australia Day long weekend.
Yeah.
And we had it finished up in late April.
That's incredible. That is incredible. I've been involved in some studio builds myself over the years, and it took us a year to build, just between myself and a friend who was a chippy, and so that's a good effort, bloody good effort.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. We were very lucky. We also at the time we had George wasn't here for the build, but what we did through iChat back then, we would work on things. We'd take lots of photos. We'd send them over, and he'd say, "How's this look? Is this all right?" So he was there with us every step of the way. And if we did go to start down a wrong turn, we were only 24 hours deep in. So
Cool.
we didn't get in situations where we had like 3 weeks of work to undo, and it was a disaster. So in fact when he came out, he just knew. He said, "I know it's going to be fine." So he walked in the room and tapped on the walls and walked around. And he just said, "Look, this is great already." And then he started playing music and doing a bit of tuning. But we were very, very fortunate, man, because I had a friend of mine at the time building a studio down at his place with a named designer, and they just had nightmare after nightmare after nightmare. So I consider myself very fortunate.
Awesome. So what kind of things did he have you do to build the room and get it sounding sweet?
Well, just building the room according to his spec. I mean, I was just a dog's body carrying hundreds of sheets of yellow check and fire grade plasterboard and all that sort of stuff. So it was just the way he designed the rooms and the walls and stuff. It was all I did was just do heavy labouring. It was just a matter of just getting the right chippies, the right plasterers, the right sparkies, and having a building manager to help me along the way with getting the right people and just getting things in sequence and trying to make it efficient as possible.
Okay. So another thing that I tell people when they ask me, man, what exactly does a mastering engineer do? Why do I need to get my record mastered? I often tell them that, man, just one equalizer that you guys use, one EQ, is worth more than most people's home studios. We're talking $10,000 bloody EQs and stuff, right?
Well, yeah, in some cases. And look, the expensive EQs are great and have them pull. They certainly help, but it's like as a guitar player. If you're a shit guitar player and you've got a 58 Sunburst original Les Paul, it's not going to make you sound like Joe Bonamassa, right?
That's right.
And you can take a very humble guitar, but if you know how to bend the notes and you got technique and you got feel, you're going to make that thing sing. So it's not that dissimilar when it comes to what we do. But if someone said if mastering was on trial for on a life and death trial, and why should you still remain in the world?
Mm-hmm.
The only reason I would suggest that anybody goes to a mastering engineer anywhere is simply to have that third-party objective set of ears on a project. Because the way I approach the work is I'm trying to think of it from the perspective of Johnny Punchclock. How does the music hit me when I hit play? And you can only hear a record for the first time once. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So now that doesn't mean I've got to nail it in one listen, but a good engineer worth their salt should be able to pull the sound and the vibe pretty quickly. 2-3 listens, you got to start getting pretty close to the bullseye.
Yep.
But that comes with experience and knowing your tools and whatnot. But it's about that third party to be able to listen to a mix, see how it sits, see how it's going to behave, and offer back constructive input, not on the aesthetics. When people say to me, "What's a good mix?" Right?
Yep.
The subtext of that is, do you love me? Do you accept me? Do you like what I'm doing? Right?
Sure.
But from a technical perspective, the way I see good is this mix at a point where I can work on it to the point where I can deliver some value for the money that I'm charging? And it's a very binary thing, Rick. It's there's no, not sure about this. And so I'm looking out for things that stand out a lot. Vocals that are way too loud. Bass that's way too loud. Kick drum way too loud. Those things that I cannot adequately, get that right, work on to a point where my client's going to feel like, I'm really glad I spent the money. Right? So it's no point me going to him and saying, oh, the chorus effect on that guitar and the breakdown, maybe pull back on that a bit, or maybe you should take off some delay on that hi-hat, or what. Those things don't affect the outcome of what I do. They're more aesthetic. I'm not the taste police. I'm not the arbiter of taste. I'm just here to try and make your record and make it sound as fucking best I can. That's my job.
Cool.
And I know where I need to start. There's a certain point that I know is optimal. And of course, every mix can be better for varying reasons, but I know where that point is where I can actually start working to do some good work.
Nice one. So, mate, I said I wanted to make it a bit of an educational thing for people so that we could get some tips as to how best to deliver mixes to you. What's some common things that you hear people sending you mixes that you think, yep, there's another one where they've done blah blah blah.
Okay.
What's some things, mate?
All right. So the first favourite that all engineers will love and know about is mixes that come in too hot. They're limited and there's no headroom to work with. Now, most of the time what will happen is the client will work on a mix and they will do their own quasi-mastering just to see how it'll kind of behave and play it in their car before they send it off.
Yep.
And invariably what will happen is it's usually an oversight. They just forgot to press bypass before they printed their mix off and sent it off. And that usually is corrected. There are some clients who insist on leaving it on. They feel like, no, that's the way I mix, that's the way it is, deal with it. If you don't do it, someone else will. And then after that, it's going to be my decision is it worth it or not. For the most part, those things you can overcome, but it's not ideal. It's not ideal because usually a lot of those mixes are overcooked and you can't unscramble an egg.
Sure.
You might make a nice omelette, but we're trying to fry eggs here, not make an omelette.
Yeah,
so it's limiting is the first one.
Okay.
The other one is the way people label their tracks. Now, a lot of musicians, artists, clients don't understand that a lot of engineers get lots of files from different sources, and they'll send you a file that just says, second take, guitar up or something. Well, when I got 20, 30 files in front of me, I don't know what the fuck that is. So clear labeling, and by that I mean the artist name, the client name, and the name of the song, so that I know whose work I'm dealing with, name of the song, and what version it is, whether there's a vocal up version. Just clear labeling, really, really important in my world. And the other one is, again, not really a fault thing, but just generally mixes that lack balance. Again, they don't fall in the category of I can work on this to a degree that I can deliver some value. And that's when we'll have a conversation with the client and say, hey, would you be open to some input here? And 99% of the time people are really open because I'm contrary to what people think. People think I work with the biggest. I mean, I've had some great names and a great roster that I've worked on, but for years now, I work on independent, self-financed artists who don't make any money in music, and for the most part have to do a second job in order to afford to pay to come and see me. Yeah.
Yep.
And so so the standard of engineering, can vary, and quite often you got newbies, you got novices, you've also got some really experienced, exceptionally talented people, making their own records these days, and that's increasing by number. But I would say conservatively, 30% of the time, I'm usually having to have the conversation with the person. Hey, can we look at something? And if it's something where I feel it's beyond that, then the conversation goes to, how do you feel about maybe looking at another engineer, maybe remixing with some stems or something like that, particularly if they're really, really new. Everyone's trying to save money these days, but it's there's a point. You're not going to learn how to do this shit overnight.
Sure.
It's as simple as that.
So you mentioned stems. Is that something you'd prefer not to do? Because that leaves a fair bit of decision making up to you. Do you just use that as a last resort to fix things that you go, no, that's fucked. I need to
I
pull out too much 60 on the
yeah.
kick drum
mm,
or
mm. I won't even look at an instrumental and a vocal
really? You don't want to
step.
make those decisions?
No. I think they're producers' decisions. It's,
Mm.
even
Yep.
like you're trying to, write a vocal. These are all really important decisions that need to be made by someone else. And then we're starting to get into this quasi mix situation. Now, the mastering community is, I think, I don't want to say divided, but there are some people in the camp of stems, and I understand it and I get it, and a lot of it logically makes sense. But if we go back to what I said at the beginning of the podcast of the premise of there's only one reason you want to go to mastering guy, it's because you want the fresh ears. Well, even if you listen back to a very simple stem mix 20, 30 times to get it right, you're starting to lose your objectivity.
Sure.
And you can almost become redundant. Now, that's not to say that people that use stems don't do fantastic work. They do. It's valid. And in fact, while I don't have a crystal ball on this, Rick, I wouldn't be surprised over time, 20 years from now, just as a guess, that we will probably see mixing and mastering meld together. I really do. I think that we're going to see with more technology, with AI, with all these other things that are going to come in, that it will probably merge into a single point. And there still may be some mastering engineers, but we may go by the way of basket weavers. They still exist in the world somewhere, but you've got to look hard for them.
Sure. Now, one thing that when I'm doing a mix that I sometimes struggle with is, should I be putting in, if don't know if I've got my low end right, should I err on the side of a little less and let you try and wind some in, or a little more and let you tame it? What would be the best approach to the low end? Because that's what really fucks people over, I think.
Yeah, low ends are hard. 80% of the problems are usually low end.
Sure.
And typically because most people now, they're mixing on near fields, they're mixing in small rooms, they're not hearing the bottom end the way it should be. They know what they want to hear. So in their room, it probably sounds fucking amazing. So they know what they're after. It's just the room and the monitoring isn't giving them an accurate mirror of what's going on.
Yep.
So in answer to your question, don't ever try and second guess what the mastering engineer is going to do. Don't think, well, if I do less of this, I'll add more of that. Because from my perspective, I'm trying to frame your picture, not repaint it. So if you're uncertain about elements of your mix, and this is where I think you can override stems here, send 3 or 4 versions of the mix. If you're still not sure, you can't hear the difference, send 3 or 4 versions of a mix to an engineer and say, hey, what do you think about these? And I'll let the engineer make a decision as to which is probably the better version. Yeah. Okay. So don't try and second guess what we do, man. I tell clients, try and mix your record as close as possible to the finished article so that I can do what I'm meant to do, which ironically is less. I think it was Dave Pensato, but if I'm wrong, sorry to whoever actually coined the phrase, but I've always liked this idea of track as if there's no mixing and mix as if there's no mastering.
Cool.
So, because everything starts from source, right? So great source material, great mic technique, great performance, great mix. So every step of the way, you get the best out of each process. Then by the time you get to our end, then you've got the best chance of getting the best result because you've taken the steps to do it right every step of the way and not do what they did in the 70s, which track engineers said, oh, we'll fix it in the mix. So don't just strive for excellence at every step, step.
Cool. What's your thoughts on bus processing? So when I'm mixing and just say from the get-go, I've been mixing into a compressor and that's brought the glue that I'm looking for. Should I be sending you mixes with that processing out or the way that I've been hearing it as I mix?
Well, again, no different to the bottom end example. Try and get your mix as close as possible, even with your mix bus compression and EQ. If it's a little bit too much, that's okay. Then send one without. But I'm going to work. I would work with a client, even if I got to call it back a couple of times, if it's close, to say, look, can you maybe just get it back a little or add a little more? I want the record to be the way you want, the way you sound. Now, people think you got better compressors, you got better EQs, maybe so. But I still want to start from a place that is as close as possible to what you want, and then Sure, send one without the processing, so I've got a reference, and I can work towards that. And if I can improve on that, I will. But at least it gives me a guide as to your tone, the vibe, the dynamic, the feel of what you're going for.
Yep.
So again, we're living in relatively fast internet world, not compared to Japan and the Netherlands and whatnot, but nonetheless, it's not a big deal to send half a gig of material. Send 4 or 5 versions. I don't care. I'd rather start from that point, make a decision, have a discussion with the client, explain to them why I came to that decision, and then we go ahead if they're happy.
Awesome. Now, a big thing over the years has been the loudness wars, as they call it. People trying to make their mixes louder than others. And one thing, I worked in radio. I was lucky enough back in 2000 to get a gig working at CFM and Gold FM up here on the Gold Coast. So I got to hear, I recorded voices mostly all day, voiceovers, and got to hear things on air the next day. I'd wake up the clock radio and go, oh, fuck, that sounded shit. What did I do there? Don't do that again. Or I'd wake up and go, oh, that was the ticket. Let's keep doing that. But one thing, I remember talking to the tech there one day and said to him, hey, man, am I going crazy? Or have you got different compression going on Gold FM to CFM? And his eyes lit up and he goes, I'm glad you asked me that. No one's ever asked me that. And gave me this big explanation. And went on to tell me that CFM was more a young person station who would only listen for a short amount of time, and they would be searching the dial for whatever was loudest. So they would compress the fuck out of it to grab your attention, knowing that people would only listen to it for an hour or two. Whereas he said Gold FM would be something that people would leave on in the background all day. And so therefore they would compress it less, because the more compressed it was, the more fatiguing it was to listen to. And he just wanted to make it easier on the ear.
Yep.
How does that ring true? What he said there?
And you're right. Look, I one of the sideline jobs I did while I was building my business was working at Triple M. I was an announcer with them from 90, 91, 90, late 91 into 99.
Okay.
And so, I used to talk to tech a lot about this sort of stuff, and it fascinated me too, especially in the context of the work I did. But, you're right. Look, loudness, first of all, I hate the term war. There's no fucking war or battle going on. It's a competition, if you will. But look, man, what people don't understand is back in the vinyl days, it was still going on. I mean, one of the reasons people went to see Bob Ludwig back in New York, when he was at Masterdisc before, Sterling, I went to Sterling before he went to Masterdisc, was he cut incredibly loud lacquers. So, on a lacquer, you can only cut a certain amount of loudness depending on the length of the program and whatnot. But still, whoever could cut the loudest lacquer that could still be tracked and not skip was the guy that most people went to. So, but again, there's not ones and zeros like digital where it doesn't really matter how loud. The ones and zeros are ones and zeros. A CD player won't skip no matter how much you crunch it. So that whole aspect of it, I think it's a non-issue. May still get talked about. There's still a fascination that engineers want to get things loud. Quite often, newbies on forums will say, "How the hell do you get it up to that many lofts? And how do they do this and how do they do that?" And look, even myself, I was fascinated by that too. In Australia at the time, the guy who was, the king of making the loudest records was Don Bartley when he was at 301. Mm-hmm. And we all would marvel, fuck, how does he do it? And, of course, we were doing it with predominantly plugins and just scratching our heads and just wanting. So these days, I think most engineers that I know, we find loudness to be, it's a commercial imperative, but we're not so obsessed with it that we're going to sacrifice the quality of the record, for the sake of loudness. And I think as I've gotten older, I've given less and less of a care about whether my record is louder than this guy's or that guy's. It doesn't matter to me at all. It's got to be right for the record. It's got to be more important. It's got to be right for the client. But it's still a factor. Let's just say it's still a factor. People still expect there's going to be a certain amount that they're going to get. And I think it still takes skill to make a record loud and dynamic or good. There's still engineering involved, still skill involved, still a bit of thinking, still a puzzle, a bit of a code to crack. But as far as just going super, nah, over it.
So when you mentioned vinyl, and when you started out, vinyl was still a very big thing. Then it kind of disappeared, but then it's sort of made a bit of a comeback in recent years. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I don't think it ever lifted away. I mean, I remember in the early, say, 94, 96, vinyl was sort of starting to creep its way in. And I think it's kind of still been with us, man. And I don't think it's going anywhere for quite some time. I think people still talk about it as if it's still some kind of new thing that's sort of just come onto the scene. It's becoming more and more popular. I'm finding 50% of my clients now are demanding vinyl masters.
Really?
Yeah, even if they don't plan to do it, just in case they decide to, they just want to have those masters that are going to be more compatible to be transferred over to a lacquer.
Okay. And do you cut your own? Have you got a lathe?
I used to, and in fact, in the early 2000s, I was cutting lacquers for a while at a place called Corduroy, which has moved on through different owners, and that rig, or most of that rig, is now operating at a place called Zenith Records. Shout out to all the guys at Zenith in Brunswick. And I think there's another vinyl plant that's going to come online in Sydney. A guy called George Pappas, if I'm not mistaken. So, George, shout out to you, buddy, and good luck with your new venture.
So, folks, I am keeping an eye on the chat room there, and I can see there's a few people I know. There's Bruce is just in there. I saw my friend Link, big fella Link. Guys, if you got any questions for Jack as to how best to deliver mixes for mastering, please leave them there, and I'll come back and ask him. What I want to know, how did you get the name Jack the Bear?
Oh, geez, mate. I had 50 cents. Not overly long. I just, if I just had 50 cents for every time someone asked me.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I'd be doing this interview from my yacht in Saint-Tropez right now, But the long and short story was jumping onto a train one night on the subway in New York, coming home from a party with a friend. And as I walked into the carriage, there's these two drunks on the subway. And the first thing I hear them say, looking at each other, mind you, is, "Hey, don't blame me, blame Jack the Bear, man." And my friend heard this and he pissed himself laughing, and I didn't understand what was so funny. So, "What's so funny, man?" He said, oh, that's right. And then they turned at me and said, "Yeah, blame him. My friend started pissing himself laughing. "What's so funny, dude?" He goes, "Oh, you're Jack the Bear." I said, what's so funny about that? He said, "Well, you'll get to learn that these guys are Canadian from the accent. That they work in what they call lumber or timber. And in that industry, Jack the Bear is the guy you blame on when things go wrong."
Oh, really?
And he said, yeah. So he said the irony is that you're learning about a craft where you're fixing things up, and Jack the Bear's the guy that fucks shit up and you blame. So there was that delicious irony of those two things. So, yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's a cool story. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so the name stuck like dog shit to a shoe ever since, and here we are.
Awesome. Mate, one thing that gets me when I'm delivering mixes to get mastered, and I often think of this as I start doing a session. It's been a bit different now that I'm recording a lot of stuff for video. Man, I'm making rock and roll records, so I'm not interested in 96K, recording at 96K. But should people be delivering to you in 44.1 and 48? What's the best? And like wave, what's the best format to be delivering to you?
I wouldn't say there's a best other than deliver the mixes at whatever you started the project at. So 24-bit is ideal. If I get someone sending me a 16-bit master, I'll say, "Hey, have you got something at 24?" Because you can hear a difference between 16 and 24, I believe.
Yep.
Between 44.1, 48, I can't hear the difference. There are some engineers who say they can. They swear by it. God bless them if they can. But don't change things midstream. I think it's more important to have a higher bit depth than a sample rate. So 24 if you can, 44.1, 48, whatever you start with, just stick with that, and I'm fine with either. WAV, AIF, whatever. I'm cool with either.
Okay. So the conversion process that you do, is it really splitting hairs? Like, just say somebody did deliver 48 and they wanted to get it mastered for CD, which is 44.1. They're not going to be able to hear that, are they? Unless they're a fucking dog.
Depends. Some can. Some can. As I said, if it goes from 24 to 16, but at 48 to 44, I don't think so. No, I doubt it very much.
How about stereo imaging? Can people go overboard with putting things to fucking stereo, or?
I think so. Yeah. I think so. Again, look, people love the impressiveness of the width of the soundstage, and it can be impressive. I believe that width should be handled at the mix stage in terms of how they place things. You understand, most of the guts in the power of music comes up the guts, right?
Yep.
Up in the mono, so that, your vocals and traditionally your kick drum and most of the stuff's there, and then all the other stuff all that out of phasey stuff comes out the side. Because it's really important that your mix has got to be mono compatible. Really, really important that when you hit mono, you don't get all the shit disappearing and really going into the background and whatnot. So I'm not a fan of widening things. Now there's a technique called MS, which is mid-side for those who don't understand it, where they take the signal, they split it into the mono and the sides. They can independently EQ and treat each side. But again, once you start manipulating with phase, I think the integrity of the mix can be lost. Now, look, there's engineers right now laughing at me, pissing themselves laughing, saying, "You dumb fuck. We do MS. We do an amazing job. No one can tell a difference. You just don't know how to use MS. You're uninformed. You're just whatever." And maybe that's the case. They could be right. But I'm not a fan of, again, if we go back to the point I was making about framing the picture, not repainting it, let's not muck around too much with what's going on. Let's maintain the integrity. Let's enhance what we got and not manipulate things so much that, the client comes back and says, "Well, what the hell did you do to my mix?" Yeah, maybe that was designed to be quite narrow, it was meant to be that way,
Sure.
But some people have an obsession with width, and again, they feel that part of the job is for us is to, take their mix and turn it into something that's completely not that,
Okay. So a lot of people listening to music now on iPhones.
Yep.
How do you take that into consideration when you're mastering? Because I know for me, mixing, and most of my mixing lately has been for product demos, and I need the guitars to be loud and fucking proud because that's what I'm trying to sell. And I got my NS10s over here. I've got to do it stupidly loud to have my guitars popping right out so that when I collapse into mono, that they still have that impact.
Mm-hmm.
And then to listen to it on a phone, man, it just seems criminal. Like, what kind of things are you taking into consideration, and what can somebody who's mixing take into consideration to make that actually work?
So what we call translation.
Yeah.
Well, again, when it comes to me, I don't monitor on 16 different types of speakers when I master. I'm a great believer that if your system is incapable of giving you a faithful and accurate representation of what you're listening to, get better speakers. Learn your speakers, learn your own. Now, in a mixed situation, I can understand because there's so much more scope to adjust. Yeah?
Yep.
And so to try to answer your question, I don't really take anything into account. I just think that unless I'm mastering for vinyl, where it's a slightly different process, I just want the record to sound good. I don't even believe in mastering for radio. People talk about, we're going to make your shit pop on radio. What does exactly that mean? Like you said, there's different formats, there's different stations. Even each station is constantly going through a tweaking thing. So how do you predict what each station is going to sound like and accordingly compensate for each situation? You can't. So make the shit sound good, and it should play well back on whether it's an iPhone, laptop speakers, big club system, radio, car, wherever. It just should sound good.
Uh-huh. Now, I started seeing a few years ago the term mastered for iTunes. What the fuck is that?
iTunes have this proprietary system. Look, the long and short of it is this. It's basically dropping the ceiling by a dB or thereabouts. That's really what mastering for iTunes is. So they got an algorithm, they got some conversion system that, so long as your master doesn't clip their converter, then it's iTunes compatible. It's a great I think it's a great marketing scam. Again, other engineers will think, no, you're full of shit, man. There's a certain thing that needs to go on, and I personally think that it's just money that engineers like to grab because it's easier. Because really, mastering for iTunes is, in my world, you drop the ceiling by a little bit so that when you put it through their checker, there's a plug-in that you can check it through to make sure. And if it goes through all green, you are master for iTunes. And we did some, give us another 50% on top, for that, for something that takes very little time. But look, engineers like Bob Ludwig, who, he's the king of mastering. He's a believer in it. He's got apparently science behind it, and I can't sit down and have a debate with him because I'm not as knowledgeable as he is. But for overall, for all intents and purposes, Rick, don't fall into the trap when an engineer is going to charge you a whole bunch of money for this master for iTunes. And tell me something. When people listen to iTunes, just the stuff that was done in the 70s before iTunes existed, does it sound terrible on iTunes?
No.
It's,
no.
I think it's more of a high def thing anyway. So don't worry about it.
What about YouTube? Do you take that into consideration?
No. Again, even all the sound, even like SoundCloud, people they're dropping the level anyway. Now, if you make things too crunchy, like on radio, it's going to be a bit constricted. But again, everyone's still trying to work. There's no standard, you see, and all the platforms are different. And I think even was it SoundCloud or was it who was the other mob, the Swedish mob, Spotify? I think even recently changed something about. I'm not that up to date on those things, but again, I think the principle of make something sound good, so no matter where you play it or what they do to it, it's still going to sound good. Uh-huh. Just make it sound good, Rick. That's the bottom line.
As I said, a lot of my mixing these days is for YouTube, and man, there is a crunchiness once I put it in there. I'm thinking, fuck, did I clip that? Did I go in too hot? You don't want it to be too quiet, and it fucks with me. I'm not sure exactly what could be the problem there, whether there's a specific level I should be shooting for.
Well, look, I don't know. All I can tell you is that I've got hundreds and hundreds of records I've done that are on YouTube and have been for years. Yep. No one's come back to me and said, hey, dude, we've got a problem on YouTube, or we've got a problem on Spotify, or it's not sounding good, on SoundCloud or Mixcloud. Never had an issue. So yeah, right. I don't know if there's a secret sauce or a formula, but if you find out, let me know.
I will. So if I was to deliver a mix to you to be mastered, is there a certain level that you want things at?
So long as it's not clipping, so long as it's not heavily limited, and I've got some room, I'm happy. I'm happy with a couple of dB of headroom. Now, some engineers think about, -6, or there's some kind of magical number, but no, I'm not. So long as it's the frequency is balanced and it sounds as close as possible to what you want and the way you want it to sound, that's all I need. I'm happy. I'm good to go.
Okay. So the other thing too, I touched on the whole loudness thing. Is that something that you get a lot of clients saying, man, just compress the mix more, like trying to fix mix mistakes? Is that a common thing?
No, not really. We if there are mix problems, we address them before the actual mastering session. Yep. Right. But I very rarely now will get anyone say to me or really ride my ass when it comes to getting it loud or make it even louder. They trust me in what I do. Mm-hmm. If there's something they want to flag, I'm happy to entertain that so they can hear the difference. But for the most part, no. I would say during the 90s, late 90s, it probably was more of an issue with my clients. But these days, nah, not ever.
Mm. So I just had I'm keeping an eye on the chats there, and I've had a few people when I've asked you things going, you stole my question. I'm a fucking mind reader. That's why I'm doing this. I'm asking the questions that I want to know, which generally relates to what the people want to hear. Now, Jack, you also do a fair bit of public speaking.
Yep.
What got you into that? What's the backstory there?
Okay. Again, it was an accidental thing. Mm-hmm. All right. So I used to go and do talks at audio colleges about mastering, which was cool. And what I noticed is that a lot of the students, they were well attended talks, and it was good fun. But something told me that a lot of these kids weren't that interested in mastering. They were interested, but not really interested. Most of them were there because they wanted to learn produce, track, mix records. And I would say I'd be lucky if 1 in 10 was really, really interested in mastering and had any ambition perhaps to go down that track. The one thing I did know was that the vast majority of kids wanted to get a job in the industry. And so what I do as part of my talk is I do the talk, and then as a little value added, I give them like a 10-minute pep talk about getting their foot in the door, about the industry, a bit of a reality check, not to scare them, to give them some reality check and to inspire them, to let them leave with hope, so that any kid that walked into that room that said, oh, I've got no hope, it's too hard, it's too competitive, who's going to want to give me a gig, yada, yada, would walk away and hopefully go, oh, geez, maybe I do have a chance. And that's all I wanted to do. I've considered myself hopefully to be a domino that just enough momentum to start another chain reaction, right? So the feedback was usually, that was a really great talk, but fuck that last 10 minutes, dude. Everyone is raving about it. And so over time, I thought, here's an opportunity for me to be able to share some input based on my experience of the industry and getting in and the lessons that I've learned. And so, and as more and more people came on and started talking, because I'm not a technical fellow, I don't understand the minutiae of what I do. I just know how things work and why they work for me. I thought better to get some people along that are more tech than me, that can give more detailed, deeper understanding of the art form. And I'll just continue working on this area, which is my passion, which is, helping kids, inspiring kids, mentoring kids, helping them find their way. And then from the industry side, then become more personal, because I've been through my own transformation and own growth, through my addiction to drugs and battle with self-esteem and imposter syndrome and God knows what else. I mean, mental health. And so I started becoming more vocal and sharing my story around, where I fucked up in life, and was very transparent in the hope that I'd help these kids not to fuck up as bad as me, or at least, have lesser fuck ups. And so we're at this point now, I'm 57 and I have a real, I love mastering. It's been fantastic to me. I owe everything in my life to it. But I'm at an age now where, I want to start bringing in other kids. I want to groom these kids. I want them to become prime time. I want them to have their name up in lights. I've had a fucking good go at this, mate. I've had more than a good go. But as I move on and get older, I still want to master records. I still want to do it for fun. I still want to enjoy the creative outlet of it. But I want to get into the hearts and minds of these young kids and help them along their way, and help pick up their spirits and help understand why it is the way they are, that they're not fucked up, they're not broken, there's nothing wrong with them. They're beautiful kids who've just had a bad start or a bad environment, and that I can help them through a process of helping them to unlearn certain things and install some new thoughts, some new ideas, some new attitude within themselves. Because, mate, I believe that to be successful, it's all good to be good at your job, but I think in life, we're only going to be as successful as we allow things to happen to us. If we're not open to, you notice how people, and I know this has happened to me, we often push away the things that we want more. People want to be loved, but the people that they want to be loved so bad, but at the same token, they're pushing it away because they're afraid they've been hurt. Things have happened to them. And so there's this push-pull thing. Same thing with success. It's just a lot of push-pull. But until you're open to receiving that, whether it's success, love, validation, you'll never be happy. It'll never happen to you. You're always going to be stuck in quicksand going, just stuck. So, and that comes down to self-esteem, man. So, I talk a lot about self-esteem, about self-worth, about self-value, about boundaries, about peer group, and then about understanding depression, anxiety, from my experience, what worked for me, what served me well. And and trying to give people a sense of hope. You know, I'm not here to fix anyone's problems. I'm not a rescuer, but just to share my story and be really honest about it in the hope that someone hears or sees something and go, oh, wow, never thought of that or never considered that, and maybe apply that to see how it may work in their life.
Mate, I got to say, like, in this industry, there is a lot of mental health issues. A lot of it. It's probably quite possibly the worst industry. I hear reports of that. And the amount of artists that I know that have struggled with depression, anxiety over the years. And I think about it, a lot of these people got really fucking good by spending their formative years alone in a bedroom working on their craft when a lot of their friends are out chasing girls, getting drunk, you know. We're sitting at home fucking learning to play Eruption by Van Halen, note for fucking note. You know, that takes a lot of commitment, and you might not, you know, pick up some of those social skills of getting out there and making a dick of yourself, you know, on the piss and learning, oh shit, that's not how you do things. And I have found that a lot of artists can be a bit awkward, you know, socially.
Social anxiety, a lot of social anxiety. Yeah,
totally.
Absolutely.
Totally. Yeah. Do you think that's where it comes from people maybe spending all that time alone? Or do you think there's a certain mindset that lends its way to creativity?
I think that's probably part of it. I don't think it's the whole thing. I mean, there are people out there who are very social, who go out a lot and still have, you know, I'm a very outward, gregarious guy, and people would have thought that I was suffering from imposter syndrome. You know, when you have a lot of depression or anxiety, you can become really good at putting on a facade to the world, where everything's okay, and inside you're just fucking melting, you know, and you don't start to, you know, release that until you're on your own, where you just, you know, bawl your eyes out, or you go home and you just drug up to escape whatever it is that's going on for you, the pain you're suffering, the unresolved trauma, which most of the time that's what it stems from, you know, unresolved trauma that people experience at a very young age, and it stayed with them, and they just don't know how to cope. See, look, man, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychotherapist. I got no qualification in any of this stuff. But the more I've looked into it, and there's a guy called Dr. Gabor Mate who I recommend people look at. Gabor Mate, he's a doctor. He's qualified, but he's come up with I think a really good explanation behind depression and anxiety. And he says that depression is the story we tell ourselves about the past that we can't get over, and anxiety is the story we tell ourselves about the future that we can't get over, and we get caught in a loop. So for most people, it's about regret of the past, mistakes they've made. You know, well, what's going to happen here? What's going to happen tomorrow? What happens if this happens? What if I lose my job? What if I don't get signed to this label? What if I don't learn how to play this solo? What if I don't become this engineer? And so, you know, we're all living a story, myself included. 90% of the time it's bullshit, but it's the story. And until we learn how to rewrite our story, rewrite the narrative, redesign, reinvent ourselves, if you will, a lot of us will get stuck in those things. And so through my journey, I had to learn to rewrite my story of the past, that, you know, that my dad told me that I was no good, and that, you know, I was told I was a shit dad, and that, you know, I'm a fraud, all these kind of things, and let go of the future stuff about, you know, what's going to happen. Well, we don't know what's going to happen. You know, we've got to learn to be present in the moment and enjoy what is happening right now. No one knows what's going to happen. We can have an idea, we can kind of predict, we can do things that may help our future, but no one really knows. And so, and it's not easy, Rick. I'm not saying, oh, you know, I'm a fucking Zen master and I've got this fucking shit down. I've just learned to get better at understanding that as I become more present and more conscious, more, you know, more aware of my thoughts, and realize, well, what are they? It's just a thought. All right. We know thoughts aren't real. They're just thoughts. So let's test this thought. Let's put this thought, and in the way, you know, in court they cross-examine people. Let's cross-examine the thought. Let's ask it questions. Is this really true? Why do you say this? Where's your proof behind all this sort of stuff? And when you actually start using logic and you calm down a bit, you sort of realize, oh, that's not true. Well, that's not as true as I thought, or that I brought it up in my mind, which then brings the whole the physiological change in your body. So it's a lot of work, Rick. It's
Absolutely.
a lot of work, but I'm here to tell you that as someone who was chronic anxiety, coke addicted, Xanax addicted, depressed, I've managed to come through that by learning this stuff and continually learning these things. And it's all about practice, man. You got to practice your scales. You got to practice your playing to become good, and you just can't stop. You just got to keep practicing, your basics and then your more advanced stuff. But the more you play, the more you build up your muscle memory, the more automatic these things become. Same thing with your thoughts. Building what they call myelin in your brain, building those neuro pathways to break old habits and create new ones. And as you do this and you go through that process, other things in your life start to shift for the better. And that's been my experience anyhow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, you mentioned that you suffered from imposter syndrome.
Yep.
Can you explain what you mean by that? Like that's a profound statement. Is that an actual condition, or is that something that you've just labelled it?
I don't know if it's an actual condition, but it's well known. I mean, people use it a lot. I've heard a lot of people refer to it. So imposter syndrome is basically where you feel you don't belong where you are. You're not good enough to be where you are. Now, in my case, everyone will say, "Oh, geez, you're awesome. You're such a great engineer. You're so talented." And I'd be thinking, I'm not technical. I don't understand what this does. I can't solder two bits of wire together. I didn't go through traditional training. What are they saying? They're just being nice. They're just being nice. They're just being polite.
Yeah.
They don't really know what my journey was to get to this. They see all this stuff. They see all the gear. They see all this stuff, and they think I'm legit. But God, if they really, really knew what I thought, they wouldn't come and work with me. And that was with me for most of my life, champ.
Really?
Up until for real. Up until I wrote a blog about it, and I think it's time that I rewrite something a better blog because I've had the experience leading me up to that, and since then, obviously, I don't feel as much of an imposter. I think now I've learned how to be humble, not just kind of say, "Oh shucks," when I'm really being when I was really being self-deprecating. Yeah. So I think I should write something else because, man, that's as much of an epidemic as substance abuse and anxiety and depression is, man. A lot of people, again, what I said before, it's self-worth, man. Until you feel worthy of what you've got and what you're receiving, you'll always put yourself down. You will always, keep that glass ceiling above your head. And again, I think because in Australia we have tall poppy syndrome, people don't generally like people to sort of say, "I'm fucking cool." I think there's a balance between being confident within yourself first, self-assured within yourself, and let you work do the speaking and let other people do your bidding through word of mouth and whatnot. But I think internally, you got to believe it, man. It's got to be in your heart. You can be told things and have things in your head, but if your heart's not buying into it, then you don't have that connection. It's not congruent. And I think energetically, people start to feel that after a while. So it's a thing, man. It's a thing. And it's out there. And I see it all the time in the kids I mentor. And, we have to do quite a bit of work with some of these people, and it all stems back to, again, childhood trauma, unresolved issues, self-worth issues, and that sort of stuff. So until we get down into the roots of that, where it all begins, we can't build from there.
It does ring very true. But I actually have seen quite the opposite, where people, you said about, the people feeling that they're imposter. There's a lot of imposters out there that don't realize they're imposters. The exact opposite. It's rare, but you do come across the odd one.
Yeah.
I think that's an extension of, what do they call it? The Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yep. That's it. That's exactly right. Yeah. They're tragedies to look at, unfortunately. But those people also have their own self-worth issues. They want to be so good at something. They want to be accepted so much that they're prepared to, play up how good they are. It's the opposite end of that spectrum of just putting yourself down, this kind of false humility, if you will, and I feel for those people too, man. It's like this young kid who not too long ago passed off one of my masters as his, and word got back to me, and had to sort of call him up and and I had to be gentle on this kid because I knew he was fragile.
Yeah.
You know, I knew that this wasn't anything sinister going on. You know, he just wanted to get this gig so badly that from someone that he used one of my things and said, "Oh, this is part of my work." You know, and so we had a chat about it, and it was a little bit awkward for him, but I tried to be really sensitive about it. But yeah, man, it's a sad, sad thing.
Mate, I got to say, your positivity is so contagious just from the way you answer your phone, you know, with like, mate, what was it you said the other day? What can I do? What can I do for you to make your day better? Yeah, or something like that was the way you answered your phone. It was just fuck, how can you have a bad day when you talk to someone who answers the phone like that, you know?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I guess over time I built it. But, you know, Rick, I'm a great believer in this, and that is what I do with my work, whether I'm mastering or mentoring. It's about service. It is. Yep. I believe we are here to serve. Just as people in the world. And I'm not talking about, you know, washing people's feet or being a doormat. I'm just saying we're here to help each other out. And so now, whether I can help you out directly or indirectly, if I can help you, I will help you. You know, if I can't do something, I will put you on to someone that does, or someone that does that knows someone that does. So I use that word often because I'm a great believer in service. We are here to serve. Mastering is a service industry. You work in a service industry. You are serving clients. You're solving problems. You're helping them. And if you can't help them directly, you know, it doesn't matter if you don't get a job from someone. Maybe, you know, you'll know someone that, if you're honest, will be able to do it better than you, or is more experienced than you, or is, you know, a better fit, you know, in terms of a budget. So, you know, I believe if I help others, I'm helping myself indirectly anyway. You know, it's by goodwill, mate. It's all about goodwill.
You know what? I've learnt that helping other people is possibly the best thing you can do to further yourself. And what I mean by that is, when I was younger and I was playing in bands, there was always rival bands, and you're just like, oh, yeah, those motherfuckers, don't let them in on our secrets or whatever. But as I've gotten older, I've come to realize that no, people aren't your competition. They're in the same fucking boat as you are, and if you help them out, it'll come back to you, man. It'll come back to you. And you asked me earlier about, oh man, how are you doing these live podcasts and stuff? And I said, mate, I'll show you exactly what I'm doing.
You did.
My favorite. I don't have a TV. I don't watch TV. I watch YouTube and Netflix on my computer. My favorite YouTube show is a show called Tone Talk with Dave Friedman, Mark Huzansky. Mate, I've helped those guys out behind the scene with some of the software that I'm using, and then in turn, mate, I had fucking Steve Stevens on my show a couple of weeks ago, and
brilliant.
And that was because of my relationship I built with Dave Friedman over the years. Did a show with them, mate. I helped those guys out. They helped me out. It's how the fucking world works, isn't it? And it took me a long time to work that out.
Absolutely, and that's what networking is too. It's people network, and they want to make people think. You know, networking is about who you know. It's not about who you know. It's about who knows you. And, you know, I mean, I know a lot of people, but stiff shit. They don't know me. I've got no connection to them. I'm going to get no assistance from them. But if I could do things to help people along and serve them somehow and find ways to bring value to them, then this is about relationships. This is the relationship economy. You know, these days we want to work with people that we like, that we know, that we trust, you know, that we feel comfortable with, you know. And so how do you do that? You build trust by giving and serving, making sure, however, that when you do that, don't overgive. The problem that I see, that people that, oh, I'll give, and then they give with an expectation, and then that expectation isn't met, and then, of course, they get upset, and they get, you know, they feel regret and remorse, and they get angry and upset. It goes completely against the principle. So give and serve and do all those things, but make sure you do it from a place of your overflow. You know, don't give more than you can afford to lose. You know, so when you give it unconditionally. On the, you know, you do. I'm going to give this guy my time with this expectation, if you will, that I'll never see him again. I'm going to get nothing for it. There'll be no reward. There'll be no approval. There'll be no nothing. And when you can do it from that, you know, do it that way, then you're going to be far better off, because you're just going to have no. You won't be upset. You won't be disappointed. And you're going to feel good knowing that I did a good turn for someone.
Yeah, yeah. One thing that I have noticed with being lucky enough to have these chats with some of the guitar players that I just absolutely fucking idolize. All these guys from the big companies, etc. There's a good guys club. There's a fucking
It
good
is,
guys
man.
club. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're a
Mm-hmm.
dickhead, people know that, and they will tell, when your name comes up, they'll go, don't deal with that guy. He's a fucking knob. But when you're a good guy in amongst all this, they all talk to each other. I noticed this when I went to Germany last year to be a part of a YouTube event, and I sat around with all these CEOs and designers from all these big guitar and amp companies that they weren't in competition with each other. Maybe they were, for sales and stuff, but they all respected each other, and it was a good guys club. And to get in with one guy, like to get somebody on the show, they'll email their mates, all these other big names, and go, "Hey man, I was just on this show with this guy, good guy. You should come on," and it's one of those things. If you don't be a fucking dick,
Mm-hmm.
people will help you out, huh?
Absolutely. One of the common traits I saw being mentored by these top line engineers was they were all really nice people. They were all really grounded. They were all really humble. And there was a club of sorts where there was respect. Yeah, they were all competing on a level of sorts, but no one I see was really trying to, hide anything from anybody, or anything sinister going on. Mate, this was beautifully reflected last year. 301 last year, I put together with Ben Feggins at 301, Leon Zervos at 301, William Bowden down in Tassie. I think Australia's most successful mastering engineer. He's won a Grammy. I mean, William in my mind is, he's the bloke. And Leon, in terms of, your international success, because he went to America, he worked at Master Disc, he worked at Sterling. He's probably got the most impressive. I mean, he is, the most impressive of all the guys. But I just got a thing for William. I love William. He's like a brother to me. And so, and Klaus Schultz, who does a lot of work in the electronic arena. So we got all together, all different engineers and different parts of the country doing different things, and we all sat down together at this forum. And there was just nothing but love on the stage, and we're all sharing our views, and even if we had some differences, but everyone managed to have really good, healthy dialogue and interaction with people, and it was beautiful to see. And also, so people could see that there is no competition, there is no infighting, there is no politics. We help each other out, we support each other, we send each other work from time to time, if in certain cases, and no one is afraid of anyone else coming to their backyard and pissing on their territory. We welcome them into our territory. So it's just nothing but good times. And like you said, it's a good guys club, and it's not hard to be nice. It's not hard to be nice.
No, it's not, is it? No. Mate, one thing I've noticed when it comes to guys who have a certain level of technical proficiency, be it in guitar playing, mastering, mixing, building amplifiers, building guitars, you realize that, okay, there's a certain level of proficiency, and then it comes down to the end user's taste, whether they're going to go for you or the other bloke, and you learn not to take offense. I did a record for my friend Brooke Supple about a year ago, and I'm no country player, and she had a bit of a country vibe about her playing, and I did most of the guitars on there, but when it came down to it, I got a chap named Sean Tubbs from the States who plays guitar for Carrie Underwood and a few players like that, because that's what he does. When it comes to mixing, hey, if you want a fucking jazz record mixed, you know what? I just don't listen to that shit. It's not, I've got the technical knowledge how to do it, but my taste isn't there. I'll hand you over to this guy who knows how to do that.
Yep.
Would you agree that that's a common thing, isn't it? That you guys don't get pissed off that you've gone for somebody else because they appeal to your tastes?
Well, it's easy for people to take things personally because at the end of the day, of course, you want the gig and you can be disappointed. It's when you take it personally. That's where you get into trouble. You win some, you lose some, so to speak. I've had times where I've been overlooked or there's been a preference, but there have been times when I became the preference instead of someone else. It kind of goes round, Rick. And so long as you don't take it personally and you understand that, it's the client's choice as to where they want to go, because you can't be everything to everyone.
Yeah.
You just can't. You can be great and you can be good in a certain, across a certain, range of music. But look, I've had clients who work with me for a long time, and they had to get this all apologetic thing about, look, we don't want to upset you, man, but we got a chance to go and work with this guy in America. Now, who am I to stand in their way? Because they want to be able to tell their grandkids that your grandpappy worked with this guy.
Yep.
Who am I to get in their way? I mean, you can't afford to be attached to things and take it personally. So it happens. It's going to happen again. Sometimes it's going to work for me, and sometimes it's not going to work for me. I don't keep score on these kind of things, but it usually does pan out pretty even at the end of the day.
Sure. Now, Jack, going back a few years ago, man, you had quite a dramatic weight loss. Was that part of your journey in finding your own way, kicking the drugs, etc.? Did that come before, afterwards?
Yeah, I think that journey started about 10 years ago when I was at my heaviest, about 170 kilos, and going into the doctor's surgery. And he said I probably had the worst bloods he'd ever seen, blood work.
Yep.
And in fact, he was so concerned. He said, look, I know it's unlikely, but for due diligence, I want to do a repeat just in case something went wrong in the lab. It may have only been one chance in 1,000, but he just wanted to cover his ass.
Wow.
And so he did, and it's just as bad. And he said, you're not going to see 50. You won't see your kids grow up. And this guy, he had a pretty dark sense of humor. He said, you could actually walk out of here and die of a heart attack or a stroke, or you might get the quinella and do both. And he was, he was serious, and he was trying to make light of it, but he wasn't, he wasn't making a joke out of it. And that started a journey, and that's where I got into, understanding about self-worth and self-esteem, and being in an unhappy marriage, and just that was where my life was the most messy it's ever been, and had to untangle things from there. So yes, it was a big part of my journey, and the biggest lesson I learned in the whole weight release thing is that a lot of it is good eating, good diet, exercise, and all that, but it's also about getting down into working on your emotional issues, about your past, your self-worth, your self-esteem, your unhappiness. Because people talk about, there's jolly fat people, and look, they may well be, and if you're one of them, congratulations and God bless you. But most people who are obese, I don't think are very happy, or live very happy lives. And just, again, they don't, like drug addicts, they don't have the tools, they don't know how to get out of the cycle of what's going on for them. But certainly the weight release is a very big part of the journey, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And how did you make the start? Because that's a big thing. People just say, I don't know how to fucking start. How did you start? I read some parts of a book by Tim Ferriss, 4 Hour Body. So it started with low carb. Started going low carb and going to the gym and doing low impact cardio, because that's all I could really do. And as I slowly started getting rid of the weight, started tweaking the diet, tweaking the exercise regime. So all in up, it took about 18 months to get rid of most of it. And when I came to the end, I got rid of a shit ton of weight, but I didn't really have much muscle mass. I was pretty scrawny, actually. And so then started building up with a weight training program. And since then, I'm probably bigger and a little bit more, a little beefier. But I'm not. I'm not a big fat bastard. I'm active. I go to the gym 3 times a week. I do a little jiu-jitsu, a little kickboxing. Try and be active. Even now during COVID, just try and walk and try and be active. I don't want to say that I missed my prime, but I spent a long time in darkness, man. And I don't want to say it's a waste, because a lot of my great lessons happened during that time. But as I'm moving forward, I've seen people, and I have mentors that are older than me who demonstrate to me what you're capable of doing and capable of being as you get older. I don't believe getting older means, dying sooner. And so I'm trying my best to live my life as best I can with a healthy mindset, being balanced. I'm not an athlete. I don't measure all my food. I don't have all this anxiety about vitamins and shit like that. I just try and keep it balanced. And so long as my body, if I listen to my body and I'm in tune with it, and I know I'm feeling okay, then I know I'm doing the right thing. Awesome. That's good, man. Because I think a lot of people are just afraid to just start, right?
Yeah, because it's hard. It's like trying to fucking jump over Everest from a standing start. It's like that whole adage of the best way to eat an elephant is one fork load at a time.
Yep.
And this is why you need, I think, support, and this is why you need people, on your team, whether it's for your nutrition and little steps, man, because each day you put it off just makes it harder and harder and harder and harder. And, we're hardwired for comfort. People love the idea of change, but no one really likes what you've got to go through. People can change like that. It's creating the habit that takes time, and you've got to go through a certain level of discomfort. But I can tell you that from being out of shape and very unhealthy, for what I had to go through, I'd do it over 10 times over, man. It was worth the price of entry just to feel the way I feel. I feel way better than I did, 15 years ago. Way better, stronger, fitter, healthier, more energy, more vitality, more endurance, and just happier. Just way happier in life, man.
Yeah, cool. I actually hit it hard a couple of years ago. A friend of mine got me a online personal training thing with Hugh Jackman's trainer, and it was all had all the diet down and all the training and everything, and got in ridiculously good shape. But it was very hard to keep up that level of stuff. But now I've sort of backed off and just play it by ear. And yeah, the whole COVID thing, I stopped training and the diet went out the window, and I started feeling like fucking shit, man. So when the gyms opened again, it was like, hey, it's time to feel that soreness. Know that you've done some work. And
yeah, trust me, man. At my gym at Doherty, shout out to Doherty's in Brunswick. I'm back in on Monday, and I put a few kilos on too, man. I'd be lying if I didn't tell you I put on a few myself. Especially when I try to be active, but haven't been as active as I was. And you're still eating good food, but calories are calories, irrespective. Yeah. And so my clothes still fit, but I've definitely, I think about 5 kilos since the last time.
Yeah.
But it'll come off. But I'm chomping at the bit to get back in there.
I'm the opposite, man. I like a lot of people stop going to the gym and they get fat. I get skinny. I've always been a skinny guy. So for me, training is about trying to maintain any amount of muscle mass. But so much to the point, man, that when I was younger, like it's very politically incorrect to say to a fat person, hey, don't eat as much, man, you're fat. But being skinny, every day of my fucking life, I would have people say, mate, you're a bit scrawny, maybe you should eat more. And it's just like, you're not seeing how much I put away. That's a thing that people don't talk about. It's that skinny people cop a lot of shit for being skinny.
You know what? I haven't really come across that, but I think because culturally we got a lot of obese people, what are considered to be overweight, obese. There's a lot of talk about that in terms of what to do about obesity, but not a lot of talk about people that are, I think people that are thin or scrawny, it's seen as being desirable. I mean, especially with girls, man. What's the thing about being a size 0 and they aspire towards this kind of, and the modeling industry, gives you these wafer thin women who look anorexic as the, this ideal is what is beautiful. Yeah. But I'm actually really surprised to hear that you get discriminated against, if you will.
No, mate, any skinny guy will tell you that you will get that all the time. Wow. Especially when you're younger. Yeah. It's a weird thing.
Yeah, I think when you're young at school, because there's the myth of the 90-pound weakling and all this kind of stuff. Perhaps, but I was a pretty chunky kid growing up, so I got the fat discrimination, but certainly not.
Yeah. So, folks, I'm going to start going through through some of the questions that you guys have put here. So, if you've got any for Jack, please put them in the comments now, and I'll start working my way backwards through them. And the last one that I got here, look at that. Shane Dunn says, I hear you, Rick, fellow skinny man. So you bring this up with skinny guys and they'll tell you, yeah, it's a thing. From Deja Voodoo, any sound engineers that you have looked up to, most important sound engineer in rock history?
Wow, there's too many to mention. I don't think I'd ever put one person up there, but some are, some of the names, I think, okay, if I had to pick one, if I had to pick one engineer to cover the whole lot, probably Bob Clearmountain would be. He's the engineer's engineer. He was a guy that growing up, his name kept cropping up all the time. So, and you know, if you look at his discography, it's just, I mean, he's a legit legend. In terms of the mastering, if I had to pick one, I'd pick Bob Ludwig, again for his prolific discography, and not just that, but also because he was successful in so many different styles of music. Whereas America's a really big market, and there are engineers there that, you know, can become specialized in a certain area. And one of them, for example, is a guy who I have tremendous respect for, a guy called Ted Jensen, one of the owners of Sterling Sound. Now, Ted can handle any style of record, but most of his discs, most of the successful records he's done have been in the metal, heavy rock, you know, crossover in the pop, but still guitars, drums, heavier kind of vibe. But he's the go-to guy. Just everyone just goes to Ted, you know. It's just, but the market's so big over there that, you know, Ted could work for 3 lifetimes if he wanted to. And I can't speak for him, but I wouldn't be surprised if he shared some frustration around the fact that, fuck, you know, why can't I do a bloody pop record? Why can't I do a classical record? Why don't I get more blues records? Because I'm sure that Ted could do a fucking amazing job on those records. But again, it's the perception thing, man. You know, if you're known for something, people have confidence in that, you're the go-to guy, bang, we're going over there. So Bob Clearmountain, Bob Louis are my two, you know, number one on the podium as an engineer and a mastering engineer.
Yep.
And that's with no disrespect to anyone else. There's hundreds of, you know, dozens of just amazing engineers who are equally as good, equally as prolific in different kind of ways, but, you know, maybe a little bit more, you know, a little bit more niche, if you will.
Sure. It's a question here from Bruce Whalen. Hey, Bruce. And I think if I interpreted this right, is it advisable to use a CD mastering plugin using Pro Tools before sending to someone for mastering? I think he's asking for yourself for doing little pre-masters to listen to at home is what I'm assuming he means. Should people be doing that before sending stuff to you?
I think if they want to send me something to give me an idea as to what the final vision is that they like, that seems to sound good out and about, to give me a guide in terms of a texture or tone, but not to send as the actual master for me to work from. Yeah, especially if it's really loud and really limited. I'm a great, you know, we're talking before about sharing information, Rick, and I'm a great believer in educating my clients. I think as more and more people are tracking and mixing at home, I think they should know how to master. And I think it's not a bad thing for, you know, studios to offer mastering as an adjunct to their service, particularly if it's about bringing some value. See, the more my clients understand about my process, not only do they understand what I can achieve, but they also will understand what I can't achieve. And it means that they're going to go back and make better records. You know, it's like someone said to me, "Oh, what do you think about online services and people that do their own?" I said, it's ridiculous to get upset at these people. It's like the chef at my local cafe getting really pissed off at me for having the temerity to scramble my own eggs, right? Sometimes if I've got the money or the occasion, I want to go to a cafe and have really nice eggs that are done a certain way. I can kind of replicate it, yeah, but I can't afford to go all the time to the cafe and on the occasion. But I'll splash out every now and again. Same thing with mastering, man. You know, if you want to just master your own records and learn how to do it and get good at it, then you can have better conversations with the mastering engineer. And when the occasion comes up where there's a budget, where you could justify the exercise, go see a mastering engineer, splash out, you know, do it that way. But it's, you know, the amount of people that apologize to me for either trying to do their own mastering or going in this direction or that direction, don't apologize. Last time I checked, Rick, there was no state or federal law that outlawed mastering that made it illegal for people to be at home and master their own records, man. Like, no, go out, learn how to do it, ask me questions. I'm happy to tell people what I do, how I go about it, give them some input. Because, again, if I can help them make better records, it's going to help me make better masters. It's as simple as that.
Uh-huh. I got a few questions. Just when I'm doing my own little mixes, and because I'm doing a lot of stuff for YouTube, I don't have the luxury of, you know, sending them to get mastered. I got to do something quickly, put it up there. So I use Isotope Ozone. And
Fabulous program.
So I'm using that to up the level of my, as I'm referencing against other. I have a playlist of great sounding songs
Records,
that I
references,
think,
yeah.
yep, okay, I know the low end on that's great. The top end of that one's, some of them are just all round. I was having the joke today that you wouldn't catch me listening to Nickelback for the joy of it, but fuck me, some of their records sound good, man. Yeah,
That's Ted Jensen. That's
yeah,
Ted Jensen
and
right there for you.
Mike Shipley that mixed some of it.
Mike Shipley mixed some of them, and
Yeah,
Chris Lord-Owls as well.
but the songs that jump out for me is Randy Staub as a mixer.
Oh yeah, Randy. I'll tell you a story about. Can I tell you a little thing about
Please
Randy?
do, please.
Yeah. Right, okay. So I remember telling this to Mike Fraser when I had him on my podcast. But no, Randy taught me how to line up a tape machine.
Really?
Randy was in Toronto.
Yep.
And I met him at Phase One Studios in Toronto, Canada. And right next door to them was a place called Lacquer Channel, which is a mastering place. But Randy taught me how to line up a 24-track Studer. Now, Randy back in the day, man, he had this swagger about him. You know, he had the long Bon Jovi hair, and there was this energy about him, man. He had this swagger, and everyone said, that guy's going to make it. This guy's going to make it. And sure enough, you know, he got down to LA in the 80s. He got to Vancouver, hooked up with Bob Rock, you know, went down to LA, and the rest of the is history. But now Randy is legit, man. He's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Cool. Well, if you were to ask me who my favorite mixers are, I would say Randy Staub, Andy Wallace.
Andy Wallace, yeah.
There's two straight away that I can just hear their mixes. I know it's them. A lot of people go for the Crystal Algae, and I hear what they're saying. It's loud, it's in your face. But no, those two guys really,
definitely
for me, yeah. Now, what I wanted to ask you, so I will up my level, so it's comparable to the references, because let's face it, if it's louder, just the way we're wired, louder sounds better in the short term. So I've got to get it up to about where they are. Should I be mixing with the limiting that gets it up to the level that compares to those? Just clipping like my kicks and snares, or should I back it off to where it's not doing that? Because once you do start limiting, your kicks and your snares do start to get pulled in a bit, right?
Yes, I can. I think before you worry about getting it loud with the limiter, loudness potential comes from lots of different things. It's not just how to get the most out of a plug-in or a limiter. And it's, I think the secret to great mixing is compression. It's how to compress things well and how to find places within the spectrum to create that balance. So tonal balance, dynamic balance. That's where your loudness and width and all that sort of stuff comes. It really shouldn't have to come at my stage, you know.
Yep.
There's no real loudness. There are some things that can help with loudness, but there's no real loudness magic or trick or juju to get it happening. I think it was Chris Athens that coined the phrase, your mix has reached its loudness potential. And each mix will go up to a certain point before it starts to break. So I would say, rather than think about, you know, how much I limit, or definitely don't let things clip. I mean, I know a lot of modern records are clipped and it's part of the sound because of the way they hit it in the analog to digital converter. But I wouldn't be so hung up about doing that and chasing that. Go back a step. Get your mix right. Get the elements of your mix right. Get that to work well, and then it's going to be a lot easier to get it up there so that it sounds not just loud but full and balanced and easy on the ear.
Okay. So something else that I do on my home masters is using Ozone, tweak a little bit of the widening, and you can choose whether, you know, what part, because it's got crossovers, whether it's the top end, mid-range, lower mids, etc. So I'm adding just a B stick of, usually in the upper mids of widening. Is that going to fuck with my final mix once it's collapsed to mono?
It shouldn't. Again, do it yourself. Test the mono button. You know, it's really important to, while you're working, to bypass all the time and see how things are sitting, and always hit mono. I'm amazed actually how many times phase issues come up for, you know, to me. Not sometimes even the phase of the whole mix. But a guitar will be out of phase or a keyboard will be out of phase. It scares me that people don't check mono enough. So in answer to your question, man, the only way you're going to know is by just bypassing it, seeing what happens. Monoing, see what happens, and just listen to it and just see what it does. It's obviously you use an effect because you want to hear the effect, but but everything comes at a cost. So it's going to come down to how far do you want to stretch it, and how much do you want to deteriorate it. What level are you going to find it acceptable? And only you can make that decision. Again, based on the program, based on the material, based on the tools that you're using. That's something that I, as a mastering engineer, don't have responsibility for and don't make the call on. That stuff's got to be sorted out beforehand.
Sure. So another thing that I would typically do, not typically, but I've been known to do, is to use exciters. And again, it's multi-band. And I'm not exactly sure how that's working. But again, in the upper mids and maybe in the top ends, in the air, I might add just a little bit using exciting. And I'm talking, man, on the scale of 0 to 100 on this thing, I'm adding, 5. And it's just enough to add a little something. Is that going to fuck with my mono compatibility? And secondly, if I'm happy with that sound and I do want to get that mastered by you, should I leave that on?
Okay, well, again, going back to the mono, will it fuck with the mono compatibility? Hit mono yourself. See what happens.
Right there, mate. So, yep.
So make that your best friend.
Okay.
You're going to wear that bastard out. Okay. As far as is it going to fuck with what I do? Again, when I go back to I was saying before about, I want you to make the record to sound as close as possible to the finished article. If it sounds good and it's right, and I check it in my room and I think it's great, then do it. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to work on a record. Don't be afraid to use bus compression. Don't be afraid to use a bus EQ. Again, if you're not sure or the engineer thinks that, listen, I think you may have done a little too much, but I'm getting the picture, send one without the processing. At least I've got a reference to know where is your vision. See, Rick, my job is to facilitate a process to help you realize your vision for your art. It's your art, your vision. So the more you can help me by explaining to me, demonstrating to me what you want, the easier my job is. Part of my job also is to be able to see ahead and understand where you're going and go, right, I get the vibe. I know what he's going after. I know how to get there. But when you can, you can be vocal, you can be specific, I love clients that can be particular. I don't find them difficult at all. The more information I have, the more input I have, the more context I have, it's so much easier for me. It's like, right, I get it, I understand. This is where we're going. This is what we're doing. Now, if there's some scope for some creative expression, or if I feel there's something I'd like to try, then it goes back to the dialogue to the client. Hey, I'm feeling this. What do you think? Can I try this? Would you like to listen to that? That's a whole different discussion. Once we get to that point and we feel if there's scope to improve, then we'll look at that. But up until that point, we're trying to match and come to the place where the client wants to be, not where I want to be. Like I said, my job's not about imposing my taste. My job's about making the client's record sound as best as possible.
Okay. That's it from me in terms of mixed questions. If anybody has any more, please put them in the comments and I'll bring them up. I wanted to talk to you about the importance that a lot of people put on gear, and I think it's actually an excuse for their creativity, and in particular, like converters, right? And you'd get to work with some high-end converters doing what you do, but I've had people ask me, should I get these converters, that converters? Should I spend all this money? My answer to them in recent years has been, man, even the cheap ones are really bloody good now compared to where they were back, when people were using the 888s in the old Pro Tools systems, right? Which was shit. That was shit.
Yeah.
Like even the budget ones now sound great. And I think, this is my take on it, that if you're listening critically to something, that a half dB adjustment on EQ on something critical like a lead vocal or something, knowing what you're chasing and that half dB increment around 2K or something is going to make a hell of a lot more difference than you harping on about numbers on a converter.
Yeah.
What's your take on that, man?
I completely agree. I compared to when I started building my own rig, the quality and converters, plugins, if they become better, cheaper, more accessible, more variety. It's the gear. There's, like with anything, Rick, there is a point of there's cheap and nasty. Then you move further up the scale, and then you get that area where you've got really good bang for the buck and good value. And then you're sort of getting into your upper echelon. But above that, then it's about diminishing returns. It's about branding. It's about, so-and-so uses this. And so, it becomes more expensive, by virtue of this association. If I had to start again from scratch, I could today, honestly, my hand on heart, I can tell you, I would be able to commercially put myself out there and make a living with a laptop, a bunch of UAD plugs. If I didn't have a room, a really good pair of maybe Audis headphones and a sub pack, and I'd be good to go. I'm talking about going in at an entry level. You've got virtually no money just to cobble something together, and because I just know how to make things work and how I would like things to sound, I can make it happen. Of course, I'd have to charge a lot less to do it, but I could do it, and it can be done. I mean, kids today are living the greatest time in recorded history for getting into the audio industry and for starting up their own business. A CD burner, a CD burner when I first bought one, like 95, 96, was like $5,000. Yeah, and $25 a disc.
Yep.
A 1 gig SCSI drive was $2,500.
Insane, totally insane.
So gear's good, gear's important. There was a time when I started my business where there was this, bit of competition around some of the studios where someone, so-and-so got a Manly Varium. Oh, wow. And so people would be curious to go because, Gear Sluts was talking about this, or Mix Magazine, or, RPM Magazine was talking about this and that. And then someone else would get this bit of gear, that bit of gear. But now, man, there's so much gear around. There's so much availability. There's so much bang for buck that no one's going to go to a studio because of the gear. It's cool to have the gear, but now it's about the personnel, the person they're working with, the service they're getting. I tell people what differentiates more successful people from others in a world where there's so much choice and so much fantastic value. It comes down to what I call love for the client. Who is going to look after the client better? Not by being a doormat, not by giving away your work for free, but being genuinely invested in the client by giving a shit and fuck. And you do that by, I find, asking questions. When you get an inquiry, when people say, "Oh, how much does it cost?" Yes, it's important, but I'm not going to sit back and just say it's going to cost you that much. Well, before I can tell you that, I need to know, well, what do you need doing? How many tracks? Tell me about the recording. Tell me about the band. Give me a backstory. Give me an understanding of what we've got going on here. Give me the information because I care to know. The more information I have, then I can process something and then, I find often that, there's a range of quoting, and, quoting there's a lot of factors that come into it. I've been known to do stuff for free simply because of a cause, or because they're usually there's a bunch of kids and I've got no money, and mum and dad are trying to front the money. And I just said, nah, you know what, I'm into it. I want to do this, or I'll do a little extra, or, the job, you can tell after taking the time to listen to it and take time to find out more about the client, you realize, it's going to take less time than I thought. I could probably quote under, because I got caught out once doing it, Rick. Just very quickly, I'll tell you the story at Sing Sing.
While you're telling that, I'm just going to grab a new battery. My battery's flashing at me, so keep on chatting away there, mate.
Yeah. So at Sing Sing, I got to work on a record for these guys who said to me, "We want to do a 10-track album. What's it going to cost?" And I just threw a figure. I think at the time it was $1,500. I didn't hear back from them. About 2 years later, I caught up with one of the guys from that band and at a gig, and he said, "Hey man, how's it going?" I said, "Oh, sorry we didn't come back to see you. We just thought it was a bit rich because, we're just a punk band. It was just really short songs." Now, if I took the time then to say, "Hey, tell me more about the band," and I found out, 10 2-minute songs, all sounding pretty identical to each other, we wouldn't have been talking 1,500. It would have been a much lower quote. So I basically overquoted myself out of a potential job because I didn't take the time to invest in the client, and that's what I mean by giving love to the client. So even if you're new to the game, take the time to build relationships with people, learn to build trust with people, because that's your currency in this world, and that's going to get you a lot further than having the latest bit of outboard gear or the newest plug-in set or the $50,000 speakers. If you don't care for the client, you're an arsehole. No amount of talent, no amount of gear, no amount of anything is going to help you in this world.
Absolutely.
It won't get you far. You'll get very, very short-term gain, and you'll have no longevity, you'll have no career, and you'll be out on your ass before you know it.
Totally. Any other questions before I round things up with Jack, guys? I'm just standing through my little notes that I took as you were talking, mate. Happy accidents. Have you had any happy accidents that became a thing? Like, I accidentally did this, and technically it was wrong, but fuck, it sounded good. It was euphonic, as they call it. Anything spring to mind for you?
My whole career is a fucking happy accident, mate.
Yeah.
No, not a lot. Sometimes by accidentally leaving on a certain bit of gear that I was using on a previous job, and I didn't take it out of the chain, and when I took it out, I thought, hang on, what happened there? I mean, they do happen, but I don't have any specific ones where it's like, oh wow, this is now going to be part of the workflow, or this is going to be part of the formula. But I think along the way you're always learning little things, and little unexpected things happen along, and you just put them in your pocket for future, because next time a situation may come up where you remember what happened when this happened, you go, oh shit, let's try this. And this is why I think it's great. It's great to be technical, and it's great to know the rules, but I think it's also great not to know, because then it doesn't limit you, and you start becoming more creative and thinking outside the square. And I mean, I'll give you an example. Mate of mine, Rob Babbage, he's over in Malta. He's really big on the techno scene over there. Mixes a lot of records, masters records. He's a badass motherfucker. He's amazing. And he's a guy that put me onto the idea of using mic pre's at mastering.
Really?
Now, your traditionalists will say, what do you mean mic pre's? What the fuck do I know with mic pre's? But you know what? It's really not as stupid as you think, because maybe in some cases, particularly in electronic music, there may be some mic pre's that have a certain tonality, a certain behavior that really work. They're not. It's not traditional to use them in a mastering studio. Look, and most of the big mastering studios I know, I certainly don't use them. But you can see how if you stick to the rules and the traditions and all that kind of shit, and don't stray outside those boundaries, then it doesn't open you up to creativity and genius. And when you think about what creativity is, Rick, really it's about how do we take different things and use them in a way where normally they shouldn't work on paper, but they do. But you only do that because you have enough courage to go, let's just see what happens when this happens. And yes, I know people are going to laugh at me and people think it's stupid, but these accidental accidents is where this so-called genius exists.
Yeah.
And you start doing these things in a way that aren't normal, and people think, the method in the madness, is what that is. So, man, there's no real one big happy accident, but they do happen along the way, and you just remember those things and just put it in your bag of tricks to pull out for use at another time.
Cool. Last thing I want to bring up with you, Jack, is your mastering drive, if that's what you call it, where you sometimes make a donation and you'll master people's tracks and then give that to charity. How often do you do that? Is that a yearly thing? That
hasn't been done for some time. And that's something that I'd like to pick back up on. But again, just time for me to do other community work with kids and stuff like that. But so basically the way it worked, and thanks for reminding me about that, because the other day someone else reminded me about it as well. I'd like to be able to do it again. So basically it worked on the premise of I'd allocate one day. At the time I was probably doing it every couple of months on average. And I'd say, right, I'm going to dedicate a day. I'm going to master your record for just a donation of whatever you can afford. I'd limit it to a couple of tracks per person. And whatever we raised in the day went to a different charity, always trying to find your small grassroots charities where we knew all the money was going to be used for the work on the charity, not to help fund the CEO's $400, steak luncheon and $600 bottle of Grange Hermitage. So that's how it worked, and that's what I did it for. These days, I like to put my time into doing things with kids. I mentor a lot of kids for free. I do some workshops where I do charge for, which are a little bit more formalized. But there's not really a lot of people that are, with the exception of maybe probably 5 people that I see speak to on a very regular basis, and I've had a long-term relationship. Some people come, then they go, and then they come back. But for most people, it's usually 1 or 2 sessions and they're off, because I don't believe that mentoring should be like therapy, where you're creating a dependency where people – I just want to be able to sit down with people, help them see things a certain way, help shift their perspective so that they go away, and hopefully they never come back unless they got really good news. I mean, of course you want to see them, but you don't want them. You don't want a revolving door. You don't want to create dependency. You want to help empower people. You want to help them on their way so that then hopefully they can help someone else down the track with the lessons that they've learned. So there's no real formality that goes on. There will be some more workshops, and again, even the workshops, man, they're usually three weeks. They usually run 3 weekly sessions. We go through some stuff. We talk about individual situations. We create a hive mind, and hopefully send people off, with some strategies and potential solutions to what they're doing. And I do it with them as well. So, one of the things we do is I say, right, next week, what are you going to do next week that you haven't done before? How are we going to improve on this? To give them some accountability. And while we do that, I do the same, because I'm not perfect. I fuck up. I'm flawed as much as they are. I just have maybe I'm a little bit better, had a little bit more experience and whatnot. But I'm just as human as they are. So I make myself accountable to the group and say, well, you know what? I've been putting this off. So this week I'll do this, or I'll do that, or I will write this letter. And so we come back next week to show the group what we did, how we went about it. Again, for accountability, because it's no good me telling them do this if I'm not prepared to walk that talk with them, in support of them, because we're all works in progress, Rick. We're all trying to improve. We're all trying to work on ourselves.
Absolutely.
All the time.
Jack, would you believe we've been talking for 2 hours already?
When you're having fun, dude, time flies.
And I say to people when we go into this, if I get half hour out of you, I'll be happy, but expect that we'll do 2 hours. It was 3 hours with Erwin Thomas, Jack Jones yesterday.
Oh, that would have been
same
yeah.
with Brett Garsed the week before. That was 3 hours, and it was like, dude, we got to do this again. There's so much more. It just flies. Yeah. But man, I want to thank you so much for taking the time and having a chat to me.
Thank you, buddy.
How can people find you, mate?
Well, I'm very responsive on Facebook. So if they go to my personal page, which is Tony Jack Mantz, I think I'm up to my 5,000 limit. But you can hit me up there through Messenger, or you can send me an email, which is mastering@jackthebear.com.au. And I'm on Insta under Mastering Music, Mastering Life. But I'm very responsive through Facebook. So hit me up through Messenger. If you heard me on the podcast, let me know if you've got questions. And, when I've got the time, I will, I can't respond always immediately, but I will get back to people and I'll do my best to help.
Freaking awesome. So thanks for everyone that tuned in.
Yes, thank you.
As usual, if you did enjoy this, I've got a lot more coming. I've got Pete Thorne. This is a guitar-orientated channel. So got Pete Thorne on Thursday. I've got Stefan. I've got to check that I'm saying his name right because he's German. He could be a Stefan, like some of my other German friends from Obscura. My friends at Angle lined that one up for me, and I hadn't heard of them. And I looked it up and went, whoa, these guys got 250,000 followers on Facebook. And then I listened into some of their stuff, some progressive death metal, and very impressive. I haven't dropped my guests for next week yet, but they're going to be goodies. They always are. So if you want to stay in the loop, please like, subscribe, notification bell, all that good stuff. I hate having to say that, but I'll make it worth your while. Tony, Jack the Bear, Mantz, thank you so much, mate. Round of applause. You're not going to be able to hear this, but hey!
Again, I appreciate the opportunity, Rick. Given that this is a predominantly guitar-orientated channel, I when you asked me, I didn't think you were taking the piss, but I couldn't help but laugh. You know, I thought this it's hilarious. I'm an engineer and I'm going to be on a guitar player's. But mate, thank you very much for the opportunity. It's
No
been a real
problem, man.
privilege.
As I
It's
said to you, I want to give people value, and most people are recording them at home themselves now, and they want to know how to best do it. And it's educational. I'm getting players, I'm getting people from the brands, and I'm getting people that can educate us. And mate,
yeah.
you're very good at educating us on the sound side of things, as well as educating us on life some. So,
Thanks, mate.
yeah, I thank you again. And
Pleasure.
as I showed people before, I've got the magic button, and this one over here, if you guys can see, it's all backwards. Says, is it going to focus? Is it going to focus? Maybe not. The camera you're seeing is slightly different. Oh, it just went into focus. That one there says end screen, and when I hit this, this happens. Bye.